Today we are in sunny Belgrade, and finally, after a super long pause, we have the Visionary Vibes podcast. And today our guest is Vitali, a technical director from EPAM Systems. To put it, in very, very simple words, it's like a massive tech agency, a software agency with more than, I think you have offices in more than 55 countries, around 60.
Countries, I'm not sure about it. It's like more than 50,000 employees.
50,000,
that's for sure,
so you're basically massive. So it's like a massive company that builds a lot of tech for a lot of companies. So I think I'll give you a chance to just introduce yourself, so that people could understand the context and like, why are we going to have this discussion and why people should actually pay attention to the things we're saying.
Okay, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on this discussion. It's a pleasure. And it was a great time, to spend in Belgrade. Yeah. So, about myself very briefly, I have more than 15 years of experience in IT, and most of my career spent working in EPAM actually, in large software engineering companies, which provide services for big clients, right? And very often it's in contrast to product companies, small product companies, startups. We have enterprise development. And I had an opportunity, first of all, worked a little bit with these more niche startups, so development. But at the same time, most of my career it was doing something big for large clients, and therefore I had an opportunity to compare. And for me, it's very interesting. I expect it will be a very interesting discussion.
What do you mostly do on a day-to-day basis? Or a weekly basis? What do you actually do? Because I think people will be hearing the same thing, software engineering, company, agency, but what do you actually do?
So first of all, it's not necessarily only software engineering. I had also experienced some time with hardware, although our focus is predominantly software engineering. So it's mostly about starting from, there is an idea, and from this inception phase, we then help our clients to roll out this idea into something tangible. Starting from, let's try to come up with some high-level vision on the solution design, then start estimating, start envisioning in terms of technologies, for example, how it can be done, how much efforts will be required for this, how much time it will take. But then we help to deliver this and ship to clients. So it's my normal duties is all about trying to coordinate groups of people, and also to connect them with the client, with client's vision.
So it's the whole stage from idea to actual delivery and building.
Yeah, it's very rare when we have something where we just step in, help us only with something niche. It's more for clients, it's they invest quite a lot in terms of, this is my vision, right? And therefore it's very critical for us to start from the very first to help even to assume the client's vision. And then we also can collaborate, the team set up for us, and then obviously it's you started developing something, but until the moment when the client starts seeing the actual result, there is always a lot of doubt, a lot of uncertainty, and therefore it's very important that client works with one single partner.
Yeah, cool. Even actually before this podcast, I told you, I think a super interesting direction for this podcast could be, we don't have a structure really on this podcast. We just talk about, business, emerging tech, innovation, startups and stuff like that. There's no script. But I think what's interesting is you coming from a massive company, and me coming from my small baby company with just 20 people. And we pretty much, obviously we do different things, but I think we are working in one direction, with AI, emerging tech and stuff like that. And I think what would be interesting is actually to start understanding for people who are watching this, how do you even approach development? And the reason why I'm even asking this, it might sound like a vague question, I know, but look, every single week or every single month we get people or companies asking about AI. AI is the thing now, obviously. The first question would be how do you even begin thinking about this? Because what I see very often is companies coming and saying, we want something. But then there's another 20, 30 questions on top of that, because no one knows, very few companies actually know what they actually need. So let's start discussing from there, let's just pretend let's pretend our target audience today watching this is a business, and I don't know, they are on their, let's call it innovation, digital change journey. Let's try to kind of like discuss and help those people understand, how they should approach it. Should they do something? Because sometimes I've noticed this. We have companies coming to us and they say, we want this. And very honestly, like after, doing a bit of due diligence and like assessing things, I just come back and say, guys, I don't think it's the right time. Like, let's try to kind of like discuss that. Like, how would you assess whether someone needs something? I know that's a very vague question, but let's try to go kind of like deeper and understand that.
Yeah, first of all, I had an opportunity to work with like a large variety of clients, and I would say that all of them are different in terms of like their maturity, in terms of understanding even their product, in terms of technology knowledge, and therefore I would say that first of all it starts from really understanding what are the kind of the strengths and weaknesses of your client, and where you can help like to feed this the gaps in the experience knowledge of your client. And therefore we very often we start from just initial kind of discussion about an idea and what are the high level goals of what a client wants to achieve. But then we start thinking, all right, this is like how we should kind of shape our team so that even initially we can have a very meaningful discussion. And then another thing is like different clients, for them, they have different like vision in terms of, okay, whether I know what I want to do versus I know high level a direction and I want to collaborate with someone. I want to have a second opinion, for example, from like industry kind of experts, so that we can together come up with like a very like solid vision.
You mean like a project or like an overall direction?
It's even like starts from the direction, right? Because like projects is just kind of a way of execution. So you can do it in a project way, and project way versus kind of the process. The difference is that it has kind of a very like specific start in it. That's the only thing. And then you can together with the client, like discuss, all right, what would be the kind of the methodology of implementation, whether it will be kind of more waterfallish, and like client is very tries to predict everything, kind of risk averse. I know what to do. I want to know how much it will cost, etc. Or it is more like very, very agile, where I don't know even what to do. I just know that it will be something in AI. I know that it will be something, for example, e-commerce, and it will be something like with like, I need to digest like any type of kind of data and then try to get meaningful insights that I can use like for my application. So in this case, like we also have some, for example, product managers who can assist, right? We have this technology kind of experts who can help to have a discussion in terms of like technology if we are ready at this stage, right? But it all starts really from understanding the client.
Yeah, but look, I think still, okay, where do you find this balance between, I'll tell you this, we have some, clients and some people, entrepreneurs coming and saying, hey, we want this. Let's say some, I'm just using this example, like some AI calculator, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And slowly after like understanding the business better and better, you actually understand that this is not the best idea. You go back to the company saying, hey, like, yo, this is definitely not the best idea out there. But you still see the business wanting to do the AI calculator because there's just this, ambition to do it, even though, economically it's not viable. Maybe there's no product market fit. So what I struggle, not even I struggle, is like, how do you, from an entrepreneur perspective, how do you like realistically assess what your business needs? Because let's be honest, sometimes even for you, it's hard to straight away understand and learn everything about the business. You don't know like all of the details, right? So then, but still, you also need to kind of like come up with a solution kind of quickly, because the business is expecting from you to create a solution quickly. So the question becomes is, how do you navigate this space where you need to kind of like comply with the trends? You need to ensure that you're following, AI, big data, like add anything on top. But also you're staying super realistic. You're actually understanding that this business product potentially will create more value. Because let's be honest, since ChatGPT was rolled out, what was it, November 2022? I think, there's no figure, I actually tried to look for it. I think roughly 90% of probably even 95% of the AI initiatives failed. I personally think that happens because everything is very just emotional and driven by pure idea and belief, which is not bad, don't get me wrong. But I think this is why like AI is failing, specifically AI is failing so hard now, because there's a massive disconnect between, the sort of ideal approach to AI and like the realistic thing that could happen. Because the way I see it now is like sometimes the maximum thing you could do now is just to like use ChatGPT so your receptionist could just draft emails quickly, and that's it. The rest we need to do in 2 years, 3 years from now, and we don't need to use AI. I think kind of like, what's your take on this? Like, how do you see this sort of...
Yeah, first of all, regarding this AI stuff, this is like, in my opinion, this is a major kind of transformational shift in the technology. It will, like, in my personal opinion, it will make a huge impact, like kind of introduction of like personal computers. But at the same time, we are still on the very early kind of age, of the adoption of these technologies. It's more kind of conceptual rather than there are like exact like actual implementations, so people know what is feasible, what is not feasible, what is easy, what is versus not easy. And I've seen like several ways, like of smaller size, like for example with the RPA, where like it was like there were a lot of high expectations, right? But in fact, it did not like make so much an impact on companies, etc. And I observed one thing which I also like see right now. So those who basically sell these products like RPA products or, for example, like Gen AI products, they are interested in simplifying, saying that, okay, this is easy to adopt, right? And then, so they always selling the expectations very often. And then it's like easy also for like those who are adopting these things, like company owners, startup owners, for them, we always kind of prefer to think positively, right? Therefore, there is always kind of this thing where you don't want to scare your like client, for example, but at the same time, you need to be like, to be honest and to set this kind of the right level expectations. And one of the things to do is to give a try. But yeah, you need to try with something really small. So you need to be very specific with your, for example, MVP, which you will use to validate certain things. And then you'll observe that, yes, it's probably not as good or not as efficient, fast, cheap to implement as was expected, but still it is like it has like tangible results. And the other thing is like be very like realistic in terms of what are the area of application, because I've seen a lot of examples where people were, okay, I have like million of ideas, how can I apply this? For example, RPA or Gen AI. And then, in fact, most of them, they're kind of not the best use case for adoption. It's easy like to start from something small where you can get the quick kind of reward, right? And then try to think, okay, how will be scaling back? Because very often also like when you create something, even Gen AI, it's like reusable for other use cases. You create the foundation first. And this foundation is very, very often something which is neglected by other people, although it may cost even the majority of the efforts. All right. So if you can find a way how to reuse this, then it's.
I agree. Like once again, like philosophically, sort of I agree here. But you use the word try, and 100% agree here, because with a lot of our partners and clients, I say kind of what you just said, like build something small, because what I see with many entrepreneurs is like they're really trying to like attack it from all angles all at once, and like you don't have clear KPIs, you don't have a clear approach, when in reality you should kind of like take a step back and think, okay, cool, let's build just something smaller, and that would be okay. I agree there. But then another question comes up, which I know from working with smaller businesses than you work with. So many entrepreneurs are afraid of doing something smaller because they are afraid that small thing that they're trying to build will not create as much of business value on top of it. So the way they see it, a lot of, builders, entrepreneurs, is like, if I'm building something small, and even if it works, will it actually create that much, profit or revenue, or however you want to say it? And I think this is the tricky bit, because I we do the same thing, but for, let's say, business, our kind of like customer, partner, 100 to 200 people business. They're ready to allocate some budget towards it. But let's say even if it's like something like, I know it's tiny numbers for you as a, in your business, but like $40,000-$50,000, the business is afraid of losing that money, right? But even if they do commit, spending $50,000 on a small thing to try does not also make sense. And I think this is where it becomes a very, very tricky question of like, what do you do then? Like, do you still kind of like try to attack all at once? Or do you still go for the small things? Because that's the problem I'm seeing with businesses. Like, they're kind of like not ready to accept that there will be a whatever number, like 20, 30, 40, $50,000 test. You're not solving all of the problems. You're just tackling a tiny bit, and it might fail as well, and you'll lose your money.
Yeah. So first of all, like, it's a very good kind of comment, right? It's, in fact, this is a big problem because it doesn't matter whether the client is small or big. They face the same issue where you, for example, you are like a managing director in a financial institution, and you have this budget, right? But even to get this budget, you need to promise something to your management, right? And then you don't want to ask something really small, because after that it will be, again, you will spend a lot of time on waiting, okay, and you're not sure whether you will get even a bigger budget. So you usually request like bigger, not just only for the MVP, but for the MVP plus, for example. But then whether you will be like in a position like to stop any development and say, okay, unfortunately it was a wasted effort. This is a risk where, every our client has to accept. But how we try to assist them here, because there are, again, few things. One of them is that, yes, you start from the MVP, but you have a bigger vision, right? And for us, this is just kind of the most simplistic, basic version of the bigger vision. And therefore, we try to estimate something bigger. We try to estimate only in terms of efforts.
Stage.
Even at that, even before, actually, the best approach is even before you start implementing something is, and this is what I advise to most of my clients, don't rush with implementation. Start, better spend more time on thinking, on visualizing, on designing something conceptually, right, before you, and challenging these ideas, before you start investing in implementation. Because when you start investing in implementation, it's like, okay, there is a certain period of time where you don't see any result. You believe that, some magic happens, but this idea could be kind of doomed to fail from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. So better and very often clients, they resist to this idea. Why? It's a wasted effort. It could be 25% of the budget just on this ideation phase. Why? I would rather I have this vision, I have this kind of full confidence, let's spend no more than 5%, produce the most basic variant of something, and then let's rather spend more time on implementing. So from my personal experience, this is not the best approach in most cases. Although, again, I've seen a few examples where clients were ready, but it's kind of you accepting a high risk. So my suggestion is to invest first of all into ideation. That's one. The second is even to try to see this the MVP in a broader context. Don't try to forget that when you're looking at trees, that there is a forest behind. It's very important to see this big picture. And then, other than that, is to have really experts who are knowledgeable, because one of the advantages of big companies, so for example, even in a niche boutique companies, is when you go they don't do everything, where they don't pretend to be kind of unicorns, is that you can pre-select those people who are knowledgeable, who have done a lot of similar projects, and therefore they learn from mistakes of other clients,
for sure.
and this is a super valuable.
Yeah. I really like this example of it's actually crazy to me how in the tech space, businesses, and I think size even doesn't matter here, is everyone thinks you can start building something ASAP. Yet in physical world, we have buildings, and you have architects, designers, landscapers, so many professions, so many jobs that need to be done before that whole building is built, right? So planning, permit, the approval, and then, the city approval and stuff like that. So it takes another 2-3 years to actually get everything sort of designed and prepared for the building stage itself. Yet in the digital product space, somehow, and I always say this, like somehow people just think, yeah, we can get started tomorrow. It's very interesting, and yeah, like I don't know why.
Actually, the best approach, like again from my experience, and this is what I learned from one of my clients. So they were not so kind of eager to get early results. Instead, they rather wanted, okay, let's start testing our ideas. And we actually pivoted several times. And even from technology perspective, so we were kind of pushing them and advising them, all right, we have a vision, more or less clear vision in terms of technologies, how it should be done. It's kind of quite solid. And they were always suggesting, all right, let's don't even try to pretend that we know how it will work, let's say, in a year and 2 years from now. Let's instead try to like create waste, but by creating this waste, let's try to validate certain assumptions. And therefore, so we intentionally kind of invested into technologies which we knew that we'll basically like throw away in a half a year. And the only benefit was that this was, for example, a backend, for kind of front end, we wanted to get the kind of first, let's say, opinion of potential users. And we pivoted several times, technology-wise and then product-wise. And basically the lesson learned for me was that sometimes it makes a lot of sense, to invest into the waste. If you know, like what, you will basically.
Was the project successful in the end?
It was like a pure success. Like we worked with this client for more than 5 years. We developed like 3 products actually, and like it was a total success.
I think though, like this is where like we're so different. Like me running for now like a 20 people sort of product studio. Our type of partners and clients, we don't have that level of, we can't afford that waste. Because I absolutely agree conceptually with what you're saying, but like with businesses that we work with, knowing that, there's maximum a month that we can waste, 2 months maximum. I think that's where it becomes tricky, if let's say in your case, the experiment fails, in our case, companies that we work, it's kind of like we can't fail. But this becomes a very tricky thing because anything to do with like emerging tech innovations, there's always a massive, chance, percentage of failure. And this is where like, I think it's super hard because I'm very, very honest with everyone we work with. I don't want to say, hey, we can figure it out for you 100%, which is going to be a lie, right? If I just say that. And I think this is the tricky thing in business, like, even you being an expert, where's that line between kind of like not being too arrogant or even, cocky and being like, yeah, we're going to build everything for you, no worries. But at the same time saying, look, we are experts, but let's be honest, no one knows how it will play out.
So it really depends on with whom I communicate. Some people, they are ready to accept this like harsh reality that we'll be kind of trying, we'll be even... Although we develop like a lot of things, similar things, still every single use case is unique to a certain extent, and therefore we'll be like creating prototypes, and then we'll see like whether it works, whether it doesn't work, and it could be, and there will be a waste. Now, some clients, they're more ready to accept this reality. Some clients or partners, they're not so much kind of open to this, and therefore. If this is like the second example, although my preference is always to be as much transparent as possible, but then if it is the second example, then in the best interest of the client, I usually try to bake in some extra buffer. And then when we do the work itself...
When you say buffer, is that a budget or like what?
Yeah. So it could be like extra time, and then when we do the actual implementation, even planning, I try to like prioritize those activities where you have like a lot of uncertainty. So you want to do some POC, to do some prototyping.
Just in case POC is a proof of concept.
Yes, correct.
So just maybe explain just in case like what a POC is.
Yeah, so it's something super basic where you just want to validate whether particular kind of idea, particular like tool, or even like the design, for example, whether it meets like the expectation. So you create something, the universe, and then usually if you see that it works, then you try to scale up like the solution around this. And for every single product, you usually have like a bunch of different like areas basically where you're not so much confident. And the best approach is like to like fail fast. So try something, but try to minimize the efforts needed to validate certain activity, right? And therefore, like ideally, it's always like to be super transparent with clients and explain that we will start from this ABCD like test, for example, and then we'll switch over. Like, and if it is all right, then we'll like start building, right? Otherwise, we'll kind of suggest how to pivot your idea, right? But if the client is not even ready like to accept this, then we like I still do just include some buffer. I start from this, and then there were cases where I was returning back to clients saying that because of this and that idea, like things, it actually what we planned to do, it is not feasible, or it will be like twice as more complicated. But there is an alternative. So not always like you, for example, when you have like you need to go from A to B, right? Sometimes you just need to make kind of like an extra stop like nearby, like C.
You can't
and then
predict it fully.
So not necessarily that your strict line will be basically what you expect it to be, like the most shortest, easiest way that will in fact will be, right? So you should be always ready like to change your approach. So
let's dive deeper on the POC, because seriously, I think that's a big topic. Actually, no matter how big you are, seriously, whether you are a 10 people business, 100, 1,000 people, because I know that's what so many businesses are not doing, and I think that should be the approach for anyone. Because so once again, POC, proof of concept, you take something simple, and in fact, I've started doing personally this exercise with many of our partners. So they come in. I'm obviously simplifying this, but like they come in, show this massive app that they're trying to build. So if that's basically you trying to build something, I think pay attention to this bit. Massive app. And then what we do together is basically we take a look at it and like say, okay, this is a fancy thing on top. This is just aesthetics. This is design. This is cool. But like, what's the really important bit in this entire app or system? Let's just pretend once again, it's the AI calculator bit. So like the login, the like button, the favorites, that's all like secondary, right? Not super important. But then we understand, okay, it's the AI calculator bit that's like the most important bit. So we just take that calculator and we tell our partner, say, look, cool, we respect your ambition, we love the hustle, but let's just really look at the AI calculator. And I think that's where like so many entrepreneurs and businesses need to be confident and even sometimes put that ego away, because like when you come up with a POC and you say, hey dude, we're going to build an ugly app, it feels a bit weird, right? Because it's like, what? Like I want to spend money, like I want to do it should be the best thing. But so I think we nearly always started doing this since last year. We now basically nearly always do the POC, because sometimes I think that's what's going to be interesting is like sometimes, especially with AI now, it might be the case that your thing that you're trying to build is not totally doable. Because imagine like you building the whole thing and then you suddenly find out that the engine can't function properly. And I think like if I were to give any advice on this, I would literally say, focus on the POC, look into the core of your app or system that you're trying to build, literally just take that component, start building like an ugly version of that component. If it works, perfect. Then you build on top and it becomes nice and fancy and you build whatever you want. Because I think last year we even had, this wasn't AI, this was AR. So we had this kind of like filters we were trying to build, like, camera filters. And we had this one problem on Android that we couldn't figure out whether it's even doable, because the client wanted, the whole solution with kind of like bells and whistles and everything. And we went to the client and we said, look, we're literally just going to do a POC, because if it works out, we're 97% done with the full product, because we have the POC, it will work.
That's actually a very like good comment, where actually interesting thing where I want to pause, and it's like you mentioned that POC is 97% of the product. In fact, this is, in my personal opinion, this is a mirage. This is a very kind of popular mistake, and I've seen this many times when people were failing. yeah, very often. So the POC is something where you spend, let's say, 3% of your time, right? 5% of your time. But then because you spend 5% of your time, you can't expect that it'll cover like the majority of the functionality. There are a lot. So you're validating one particular use case, technology or business use case, and that's it. And your goal is to simplify, to make it as much cheaper and faster, this validation, as it possible. And therefore, you're cutting everything else, right? And very often clients, they mistake this POC with the MVP. And I've seen this
I agree.
Yeah, where it was, in fact, like we were developing one solution. I mean, we started from the POC. It was the core common part of this solution. We were not sure. We successfully kind of finished this POC within, let's say, 1.5 months or 1 month. Yeah. And then we basically started estimating what will be to make it productionize it, right? And then it was like 6 months plus of implementation. Although for the client, he already kind of sold his to the top management that it will be another 1 month maximum of implementation. So we got this massive kind of disconnect, and this was because he thought that this is like POC is almost MVP. It's almost ready MVP.
When in fact it's just like one specific
bit and that's
function
it.
Within.
Yes, correct.
I think that's because the illusion, the optical illusion with the POC is that it's like an engine. If it works, then you kind of feel like, oh, I just need the wheels now, and it's ready to go. I think that's really the problem with POCs. But still, I think it's a very good approach and angle to sort of innovation, because otherwise you'll be thinking that, oh yeah, I'm gonna build everything now, quickly, cheap, fast. When POC is that actual test and understanding whether the thing will work, how much it will cost, is it even worth it? I think that what becomes the critical factor. But then I have a question for you. No matter, once again, what size the business is, on a very, very tactical level, how do you approach it? Cool, so people understand now they need a POC. Let's pretend there's some business now thinking about AI. Let's just take AI as an example. Forget about anyone, external consultants like me and you. People are just trying to do things on their own, and that's fine. How do you go about this? Do you just look into your business and you come up with ways on how you can improve it? Do you look at inefficiencies, or do you look at opportunities that how do you assess things? I know this is a very high level, vague question, but where do you even begin? Because I feel that's the challenge for so many people, not even understanding, do I tackle the wastes and inefficiencies within the company? Or do I optimize so that my team becomes 10 people instead of 40 people?
This is for managers, probably the most important kind of skill, how to properly kind of assess, try to predict this future. I can say that I'm more or less kind of confident in my kind of assessment in terms of from the process wise. I know how to optimize this because this is my bread and butter. But in terms of, for example, the product, this is where I have some kind of limits in my kind of expert.
No, forget about the product.
But
before the product.
Yeah. So first of all, so we, for example, we have the POC, right? And this is where we try to, with the minimum amount of time, minimum amount of budget, try to validate certain things. And therefore, you don't need a crowd of people around because it will slow down you, right? You just need only a few core people. And then, but once you have this done, right? So my approach is the following. So first of all is start from designing and then try to split.
When you say designing, what do you mean?
Yeah, so start from conceptual, visualizing, trying to visualize, okay, what you want to implement, and then split this into certain kind of areas. Then solution architecture, document the design of this. This is where I would, I recommend to my clients to invest time in most cases, unless this is very simplistic, very kind of typical approach. Because you, again, before even starting to implement something, you start challenging the ideas. Whether technology-wise, for example, doable, not doable, whether this will, basically the product will bring you all what you need, yes, no. And then I usually start from the core team, so the most senior people, and then just at some point start scaling them up, right? And then my preference is not to have like too large teams, right? But at the same time, not to focus only like to have unicorns, for example. And this is again something probably that will differ like small companies versus like larger companies. And the like neither of these approach, like to have those people who are kind of unicorns who can do everything versus like those like where people have very strict specialization. Neither of this approach like is like ideal. It really case by case varies. So when you start from something small, right? You have like for you what matters more is flexibility, right? And therefore like having like a team who can do a lot of things, right? A smaller team, that is always an advantage. But then, for example, you start building like an enterprise solution, for example, like something like larger, starting to scale, right? So you would probably want to have someone, for example, who will be super knowledgeable in terms of automation testing, right? In the past, this has been covered by like developers, right? But developers may continue doing this, right? But first of all, they will create a suboptimal solution. The second will probably for them take like twice, 3 times more than for professional automation tester. And this is one of the areas where you can potentially start like for the same budget, start like making the difference, right? So like bring this efficiency. But at the same time, okay, you need to predict, okay, how much work will I have, right? So for me, one of the also kind of secret sources was always like, in terms of like when we trying to kind of create a plan for the solution, and then when we create even this kind of the metrics, how we are kind of going according to this plan, is never ever forget about like how we're managing the scope. Right, so you always need like if you have like especially a large team, you always need to be sure that you have work for them specifically for them in advance, and then sometimes it's better like not to have the optimal like team for today, just because like for the optimal like team tomorrow you won't have kind of enough work, right? And then never forget about this. And this is, again, another typical kind of mistake is that, all right, we'll make kind of a swap in the team, change like the team configuration. In fact, you always kind of, it's like your team will have to rebuild from scratch, right? And then you will lose like the knowledge. And then, for example, you build like, you add one extra developer. So like, it doesn't matter how like senior this developer is, still like someone from your team will have to invest their time into like knowledge transfer to this newcomer, right? So you're not interested into like making too many changes because you will be losing this. And then another thing, probably just kind of an advice, which again I usually give to clients, right? Don't try to rush and to create like, for example, full-time automation or like full scale, like cover everything with documentation, but try to find the reasonable balance. But don't like try to save money where like better not to save. And as an example, I mentioned the solution architecture diagram, or like start to think to design before implementing. Another thing is like automation testing. If you, for example, or testing in general, right? Unless this is something very kind of small like product, you would want like to make sure that it is tested properly over a period of time. And the longer the product, the more kind of it is backend kind of wise, right? The more you would be potentially interested in having a proper automation testing, and you invest upfront. And it's like initially it will be kind of your pure like not efficient at all, but then you'll start to get this kind of extra like benefit over time, right? And the longer it will be, the more you will benefits you'll get. And then similar with the documentation, right? So very often people say that, all right, we are going this agile, it means that everything is flexible. We have everything like in these user stories, right? You can always kind of find this, but imagine that you have hundreds of user stories. It's like because mission impossible to find something. Therefore, you want to have this skeleton of like somewhere like on Confluence, like Azure DevOps, like Wiki, where you will have the key kind of information with some links to key recordings, for example, because you don't want like to put the transcripts of everything, right? Or like key missing minutes, right? Or like key user stories, for example. It helps like people to navigate, especially if you kind of either will be like testing later on, or for example, like someone will be kind of like you will be wrapping up the team, right? You just spend far less kind of on this nature. So there are like lots of kind of small things, but in short, like don't try to kind of save money where like don't try to cut corners where like you should not. That's one. The second is try to build like the really like be reasonable about what type of team you need, and it really depends on the duration of the project very often. Right, so the longer it is, the most and the bigger the team, the most kind of specific specialization you'd be interested to have. Like the smaller, the more niche it is, then probably like unicorn type of teams will be more preferable. And then probably the last thing is like even in terms of seniority, try to build a balanced team, because you don't want to waste too much time and money on like having only like super kind of stars in your team, because they will have plenty of kind of boring like activities. They will be kind of demotivated, and they will not bring this extra value on doing like typical kind of stuff, rather than like, for example, like someone with 1-2 years of experience. But at the same time, there will be some kind of like challenging ideas where you'll have like 100 times kind of like the difference between junior and someone really experienced. So you would be interested in having like a properly balanced team.
Yeah. On your first point on cutting corners, one of the exercises that we do with all of our partners, I mean, you probably don't do it because, as I said, like we mainly work with businesses like 200 people, is we actually try to put a cost on every, like talking about AI now, we try to put a cost on every single process within their business, within their company. And even though you might not get it fully correct and like, you know, everything won't be super accurate, though it's very interesting putting things on paper. Let's just pretend you have 10 processes. So what we do is like we map out all of those processes, like kind of like a user story, user flow, like A to B, B to C, and so on and so on. So like you go in detail and kind of like try to put the whole process on paper. Then what we do, based on that process, we try to brainstorm together and understand, is it even theoretically possible to automate that process? Because funny enough, when it's on paper, you actually look at it and you say, you know what? Actually, in this step, always, you know, David needs to call Susie and Susie needs to go to that shop, like physically. And then you kind of start understanding, actually, we probably can't even automate that process. That's number one. The second thing, and then straight away people are like, oh, okay, yeah, like how am I going to automate this? So we kind of pause that, you know, process in terms of like AI integration. The second thing that we do internally is like we try to put a cost on every single process. Because let's say there's once again 10 processes, we put a cost on every single process. So 3 of them you can't automate. So we have 7 left. Now for those 7, we put a cost on each of them. And suddenly we find out that the cost of the first process is, let's say, I don't know, $30 theoretically. But the 6th process is $300. So in terms of priorities, because once again, I told you earlier, we have to be efficient, right? We can't just do anything. We actually, with a partner, we say, look, realistically, process number 6 costs us $300 per process. So let's integrate AI over there because it just makes sense. And, you know, in the next 1-2 years, we try to kind of like, you know, automate all of the processes, but we start with a high priority one. So in terms of my advice, apart from just cutting corners, once again, because I come from a world where you have to be like super efficient, you know, super, you know, I don't want to even say like stingy, but like in terms of money, but like we still have to be super cautious. So for anyone who's operating and working with relatively low budgets, I think priority is a huge thing. And this is why I'm a big fan of like putting everything on paper and like really trying to map out the entire business to really understand, okay, with my limited budget, I know I'm not going to do everything, right? But I'm just going to focus on process number 2 and number 6, because then realistically, I can spend my, whatever it is, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to actually create those results. Now, I think that's one of the best exercises. I know this is super tricky with big businesses.
Actually, in fact, it works, right? It's we are
that's
just
what we do.
Yeah, we're just kind of doing this on a bigger scale, right? But you're absolutely right, because very often clients, they come with realistic expectations, for example, and then we don't like initially even know whether this is realistic, not realistic, and then we together like investigate and we see, okay, this, for example, particular feature has one kind of cost and has the following value, right? And then another feature has different cost and value. And then we together reprioritize, and then we can decide even to drop certain things, or we have a limited budget, right? And we see that everything doesn't fit into this budget, right? So this prioritization is, I totally agree with you. It's like
because otherwise, you say spray and pray. So otherwise, that's the whole problem with like any. And you know what's the interesting thing? Even though we come from very different worlds, I feel like it doesn't matter how big your budget is. Because for me, I'll clarify. It does, like, my clients could waste, $100,000, and like that will damage their business massively. In your case, they might waste millions of dollars, but ultimately, percentage-wise, it's the same thing. And I think that's what makes it super interesting, is like the approach still remains the same. It's just probably your clients are going to have another 0 or 2 at the end, while I'll have, fewer of those. I think ultimately the approach is, though, kind of similar. Like, you can't waste resources.
The approach is similar, the same, right? Although, like, I believe there is like a difference in mentality, because like if you talk to the owners of the business, right, they take it very like serious, every mistake. So they are kind of more very often risk averse, right, than like those who are just executives, managers in larger companies. On the other hand side, those who are entrepreneurs, they used to kind of operate in a risky environment, right, to make kind of, decisions, critical decisions. And therefore, it's more a matter of how you will explain the pros and cons of every single, right? If you manage to do this.
True. I think you're right. Like, mentality is super different. Because with my partners, we always like, we're always there and like super active. I'm not trying to say like your, sort of colleagues and your teams are not active, but like I see messages from my people on Saturday and Sunday because it's mainly business owners and I directly deal with them. And it's like, it's a totally different energy. And to be very honest with you, that's why I enjoy it so much. There's some, even if the approach is the same, there's some difference when like it's the owner directly involved in the process, and like, you have to deliver, and your work matters because they see it directly, and we can launch something tomorrow and it's already going to be live. But I agree, the approach should be kind of like similar. But I think because we're trying to keep this kind of like video super, super tactical, and we're kind of like, I think it's closer to the end, let's pretend, and I'm going to put the number $10,000, but depending on who is watching this, it could be 100, 1 million, 10 million, $100 million, depending on the budgets and appetite. Let's call it that. We were talking about the approach. We were talking about the breakdown. You were talking about design. Let's take the number 10,000. I've got $10,000 to begin doing something. I want to hear your take on the proportions. So if someone is trying to do something, give me the breakdown for those $10,000, hypothetically. How are you going to spend those $10,000?
Yeah, so for me, first of all, $10,000 is like automatically like means like something small, right? And it's only like to give a taste of something, like to investigate, like to the POC, to make a feasibility check, right? And it's like a work of a couple of people, mainly part-time, and probably like a couple of months maximum altogether, right? So it's feasibility check. That's all you can get. And then if we are talking about the feasibility check, then really depends on like whom you have. First of all, you'll need someone who'll understand like the basically the client, their needs, right? And for such a small team, it will be like someone consultant / manager / this person will also like do certain things, right? Probably like test the ideas, like maybe like even act as a hands-on, for example, engineer or solution architect, whatever, right? But it will be like just kind of trying to get this information about like the idea, try to put it into certain kind of format. And then you would probably, for this feasibility check, you definitely need to kind of to come up with high-level kind of technical vision, like not just only the product vision, but also the technical vision, right? And then try to provide kind of estimate, right? It will be a team's effort. Like, so for example, there will be 3 people working on this part-time on this kind of feasibility check, right? So all 3 will be involved to just kind of those, for example, like a tech lead / architect will be more involved into creating the technical landscape, like the vision, and then like helping from like technical perspective, like with the estimates. And then as this consultant, more will be involved from the product perspective. And then also like making sure that, in terms of prioritization and even like to challenge the kind of the estimates, like this will be very available, right? And then let's say the third person will be like niche kind of experts, let's say in AI, who say that, all right, we need like to apply the following type of kind of algorithms, or we'll go with this particular, for example, platform for this, right? Or like I've done similar, and this is just comparably like what were the kind of the lessons learned, what was the estimate, right? But then and probably even creating the initial dummy version of the solution, right? And I would say that, probably like it will be equally like for such amount, right? But if you go with like a bigger, let's say it will be 100,
yeah, right? We're using number 10,000 just kind of like as an abstract number here. It could be 100. It's more like relative to the size of your business. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. So for the size, again, like I'm more used to like to operate in like hundreds of thousands of, right, and it's like bigger teams, right? So for us, again, the smaller the budget, right, the more kind of weight will be on analysis, right, and the less kind of tangible output you will get, right. The bigger the size, the more time you basically spend on implementing something kind of and scaling up this solution.
No, I totally agree with this. I would say exactly the same thing. But I think the last thing for this kind of like podcast, this video, because I was trying to keep, and this is why I really want to have you here, seriously. You're super, super tactical without just, brainstorming about AI and so on and so on. I don't know, just your final advice, whatever, on development, for any of the entrepreneurs, businesses out there, like any final thoughts? I don't know.
I would say like be smart in terms of how you spend your money. Don't run only for the cheapest, for sure, service. Don't run for the most like expensive kind of service where people will be saying like, I mean, we are like super kind of duper expert, and therefore you like pay triple the price. Try to find those people who will have a proper, let's say, pricing model, like a justifiable pricing model. But at the same time, also try to find those people who will be really interested in your particular kind of example, where you'll have this on a personal level image, because it's like you will have to trust these partners, right? And it is very important that they basically like value your particular use case as much as you value.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Some wise words over here. So I think that's pretty much it for today, really. So for anyone who is watching us, thanks a lot. I hope this was a great discussion. And, after such a long pause, I think this was a very, very decent episode 2 for Visionary Vibes. So it was really great to have you here. And I think let's do it, again at some point.
Agreed.
When, we do more projects, we have more experience, and it'll be great to talk again.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you.
Thanks a lot for having me today.
Thanks. Bye.